Hey everybody, it's author MD New. Welcome back to my writing tips and tricks for authors. So today, before we close out the year, while we're still in the holiday season, I wanted to do a look back on all the books and short stories I've read throughout the year and tell you a little bit about them, why I chose them, why I liked them, and why I recommend them. These are all queer books by queer authors, so sit back, relax, and let's talk a little bit about these books. So, first up is a horror story that is written by Jonathan Pongratz, and it is called The BEK Curse. This is a short story, and I gave it 5 stars. Now, why I gave it 5 stars is because it deals with the legend of the Black Eyed Kids. This story revolves around a retired couple, Maria and Richard, and how they are visited by these evil children. This story has got everything. It's very Alfred Hitchcockian in style, and I really liked it. It was short, it was creepy. It definitely does not make me want to see creepy kids anywhere in the neighborhood. So, yeah, it's kind of fun. It was a really short read and it was very well written. And I think that Jonathan did an amazing job. As I said, I gave it 5 stars. It is a horror story. But yeah, it is worth reading and I definitely think that you should check it out. Up next is one of my favorite authors, and he released his novel Cursed. Now, this story I'm giving 4 stars. It is a dark urban fantasy paranormal MM romance. And the reason why I'm giving it 4 stars and not 5 stars is there were a couple of issues I had with the story, but overall it was wonderfully written, wonderfully told. And this story is the second book in J.P. Jackson's series, Magnus Malefica, and focuses more on Cam Habersham, who we meet in the first book and is now dealing with becoming a fae. So this story is, as I said, it's a dark urban fantasy, but it deals with werewolves, witches, fae, all kinds of paranormal creatures. We also get to meet Sparks Gemmel, I think that's how you say his name, who is a witch and had a lesser role in the first book. We get to learn a lot more about him and his character as he deals with the fallout of the last book. The problem I had with Sparks is, for me, he really wasn't that likable of a character, and I kind of just had some issues with him overall. But luckily, the writing and the other characters really gave me everything that I wanted and more from the story. So that's why it did so well. This story is about the Shadow Realm that is alive and well in Edmonton, Canada. And it deals with witches, as I said, fae, werewolves, and other creatures. And it's fun, and it's a great continuation to the series. So if you like dark urban fantasy and paranormal MM romance, this is definitely a story worth reading that I think that you should check out, as well as J.P. Jackson's first book in this series. They're both really, really excellent. The next book that I have that I am really excited to talk about is A Symposium in Space by K.S. Trenton. It is science fiction and it is 5 solid stars. This author does not have a lot of works out, but is really active on social media, sharing blog posts and additional writings and everything like that. This story was phenomenal. It is a lesbian retelling of the classic The Symposium, written by Plato. So if you're familiar with that classic story, then you will be very familiar with this retelling. I don't want to give too much away, but honestly, this is a wonderful short story. It's a really quick read that is worth your time, worth spending the hour and a half or so to read it, maybe less if you read really fast. But it's just excellent. It's wonderful storytelling. This is true sci-fi storytelling at its best, and I really hope K.S. Trenton produces some additional books because she is such a wonderful writer, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more from her. Next up is another great author who I just really admire and enjoy. His works are always wonderful and fun and just charming, and they really, if you ever get a chance to interact with this author, you'll see why. You'll see him in his works and vice versa. So the author is Glenn Quigley, and it is his short story Uses Wallpaper that I'm talking about. This is a wonderful five-star story. It isn't pure MM romance, but it's not the typical gym body 20-something-year-olds who fall in love and are perfect. And these are more the normal, everyday gay men who work and live in the world and are just wonderful. So this is one of those stories that'll keep you smiling the entire time you read it. The author masterfully crafted the story, and it's set in the country of Georgia, which I thought was really interesting, especially given everything that's going on in Europe right now. So this is just kind of a wonderful story about the countryside there in Georgia. It takes place between two main characters, Stuart and Odar, and they're a wonderfully unique pairing that you wouldn't expect to be what you see on the pages. Anyway, they're wonderful. They don't dive into the typical stereotypes, but it's a romantic adventure of just two everyday men that I think is worth reading. So if you enjoy romantic short stories, this is one to add to your list. And it's also another quick read, which is nice if you don't have a lot of time. Next up is, we're back to J.P. Jackson because I've read a couple of his books this year. And this one is one of his short stories, and it is called Drag to Hell. And the short story itself, now this is a five-star short story. There's no other way of saying it. It is urban fantasy and it is horror, and J.P. Jackson really knows how to write some creepy tales which are wonderful and a lot of fun. So this story is about Nathan, aka Azadora Necrophilia Hex, and he wants to become a drag performer. But Nathan also has a strange ability with the other side, again, the shadow realm, which adds to him and his life, where whether he likes it or not. This is a dark story, but at the same time, it builds a deeper universe that J.P. Jackson is creating for some of his other stories. So it's quite enjoyable and a lot of fun. Basically, what we get to see here is the character Nathan is kind of possessed, but what he's possessed by likes attention, and when Nathan decides to become a performer, the thing that possesses him really loves it because they get to kind of do wicked fun things, and it's very bizarre. But it is a very fun, very charming, dark urban fantasy horror story. It will definitely make you want to check things out, and especially things that go bump in the night. So it's kind of got that creepy factor, but again, it's a lot of fun, and I gave it 5 stars across the board. Next up is another amazing author who I read this year, and that's R.L. Merrill for their new book, Sundowners. Sundowners is another 5-star book that I read, and it's about one of my favorite topics, vampires, and it's also an MM romance, which I thought was cute. It's the first book in a series, so keep that in mind. There's a lot that happens, there's a lot of world building, but the story is there and you don't get tired or you're not bogged down. This is a story about energy vampires that live in Santa Cruz, California. This is also the first book in the series, as I mentioned. So there are more books yet to come. So hopefully we'll see those this year or in the coming year. We follow Creed and Roman as they have to solve some strange attacks that are happening in and around Santa Cruz. There are some excellent references to the Lost Boys as well, which I really appreciated. So if you've seen the movie The Lost Boys, you're going to get a kick out of this book because there are some great references, especially since The Lost Boys was filmed in Santa Cruz, California. What I liked about this book is the fact that R.L. Merrill uses energy vampires, which are a little bit different than the typical vampires. Also, if you want to learn more about this book, definitely check out her interview on Rote podcast. I'll leave a link to it below, and she goes into a lot more details about it. But this book, well worth the read, especially if you like music and vampires and an interesting story. This has got you covered. It was a great read, and I highly recommend it. So coming up next is Social Media Central by Kevin Clear. And this is the book one in the Taylor book series. And it's very different. It's a gay story, and it's futuristic, which is kind of different. So this one is about a future where social media is everything. It makes or breaks society. It is very much, in my opinion, a metaphor for what's going on in society right now. So it's kind of eerie and creepy, but man, is it good. Totally worth every star I gave it, which is I gave it 5 stars. So, in an age where everyone lives their lives through a screen, no one has more celebrity status than fashion blogger Madeline Q. In a chance meeting with Taylor, loner and geek, he's introduced to her world of parties, fan worship, and seduction. That's a little bit about the story, kind of gives you a taste of what it's about. This is a wonderfully darkish story that I cannot recommend enough. It really shows a potential future given how social media seems to affect every part of our society these days and how important it is to everyone. It's kind of a future that we don't really want. So it's something to definitely take as a warning, and definitely something that we should all be leery of. The next book that I have on my list, and this is my last book that I really want to recommend. It was the last book that I read this year, and I just finished it up a little bit ago. It's called Firstborn Sons by Vincent Meese. Now, this story got a 4 stars from me. It is a contemporary gay fiction story. It's an excellent, excellent read, but there were some aspects of it that I wasn't a real fan of, so I couldn't give it 5 stars, but still, it is very good. So this story is about a group of coastal Californians who battle wildfire, racism, and their own demons in 5 distinct narratives set in the late 2019s, 2020s. So it's right at the beginning and through the pandemic. That is kind of part of one of my issues with the story, but not in a bad way. It just kind of there's a lot of politics in this one that and a message that the author wants you to get that he makes quite apparent through the story. So the story is part of a greater universe that Meese has written about, and the story, as I mentioned, starts before the pandemic and ends as things are starting to reopen and as we're learning to live with our new normal. The characters are rich and charming, which I really appreciated, and there is a story message about racism that is weaved throughout the story, and it can be a little heavy at times, but it is an important message, one that we really need to think on and pay attention to and learn about and understand, because that message, we're just not in a place where we've are any better, it seems, with dealing with racial tensions and everything like that. So that's a big part of the story, and it's really important. So it is one of the things, like I said, I'm mixed about it because the message is so important, but at the same time, you kind of get it's kind of repeated over and over and over again, which makes it kind of tough. But it's still excellent. It's a wonderful story, um, but it's not it's not fun and light like all the other stories. I mean, the other stories are all fantasy or dark fantasy or sci-fi or urban fantasy or romance. This is contemporary, so it's not a light, fun read. It's about the real world that we all deal with and experience on the daily. So it is a bit of a challenge there. So it's not going to be fun and light. So, but it's definitely worth the read. And as I mentioned, there are some really heavy themes that may not be for everyone, but still, as I said, this is a great read and it is a solid 4 stars. So these are the stories that I read this year. I have more about each of them over on my blog, which I will link below. And you can go back and you can read all the different reviews that I did for each of them. I go into a lot more depth. I have the links where you can buy them. And really, these are fantastic queer identified authors who you need to read these stories because they are so important. They're so diverse. They're so wonderful. And it's something different. And you're supporting some very talented people who may not have the name recognition, but really have the talent and should be on your must-read lists. Okay, everybody, I've been author MD New. Thank you so much today for hanging out with me, letting me go through my books that I did this year, my reading roundup for 2022. So let's have a great 2023, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again next time. Alrighty, everybody, take care, have a good day. Talk to you again soon. Bye.